So just a couple of weeks ago, Tesla announced the 2026 Model X refresh. Although I'm not very impressed. All they added was ambient lighting, a front bumper camera, and some different wheels. That's lame. So maybe it's worth looking at an older one to save some money. This is a 2021 Model X Long Range Plus, the last of what Tesla calls the legacy Model X. These come with some notable advantages compared to the newer ones, including a more user-friendly interior, at least I think. More range, surprisingly. The older car has more range, that's weird. And finally, a much lower price. However, there are some massive disadvantages, such as slower charging, older technology, and lower performance. I'm going to take you guys on a walk around of this 2021 Model X and try to answer the question, is it actually worth saving 15 to 20 grand to get a Raven compared to a Model X Palladium? I'm then going to tell you about some of its quirks and features. I know that made you guys mad because I'm not Doug DeMuro. And then I'm going to take it for a drive and tell you guys what I think as a Model 3 owner driving a Model X. Let's get started. You guys probably heard me say the words Raven and Palladium, and you're probably like, what the heck does that even mean? Well, Raven is actually the code name for the late 2019 through 2021 Tesla Model X. The Raven brought some key upgrades needed to the Model X to make them more competitive compared to Tesla's own Model 3, including a permanent magnet motor that came out of the back of a Model 3, was placed in the front of the X to give it better efficiency and one-pedal driving. They also updated the battery pack's peak charge rate to 200 kilowatts compared to the older car's 150 kilowatt peak rate. They added adaptive air suspension and some other small little quality of life improvements. However, compared to the Palladium models, otherwise known as the Model X Plaid generation, these are missing some key features that I'll talk about when I walk around the car, including phone as a key, the digital air vents, 250 kilowatt charging rate, and a bunch of other little things. So I'll let you guys make the decision on whether or not those sacrifices are worth it to save 10, 15, maybe even 20 grand by going with the Raven versus the Palladium. Let's start up at the front. Now up at the front, you'll notice that the Model X really hasn't changed over the years, especially considering that this one isn't even a refresh, which means it looks exactly the same as when it did when it came out in 2016. You'll notice that down here you have your turn signals and fog lights, and up here you have your main headlights and DRLs. Now, the upper headlight on the new Model X is basically identical with the exception of the addition of matrix functionality. These were actually the only thing on the Model X that changed as far as styling goes for the Palladium models. This is a Raven, so this has the older style fog lights. The newer Model X's just have a line here with the fog light integrated, and the turn signal, I believe, is either in the place of this DRL or down here. And it's just designed like that on the newer ones to look a little bit more like the Model 3. Let's pop the front trunk. Now you'll notice I pushed the front trunk button, but it didn't actually open. No Model X has a power front trunk, which is a bit of a bummer, but you can always add that in the aftermarket. Space up here is actually pretty freaking good. It's a pretty massive trunk, so it is nice to have considering the fact that the rear trunk with the third row in place is quite small. Just make sure that when you're closing this, you apply pressure on the inside of this hood edge, not the very edge, because you can actually dent the hood like someone has done right here. So just be careful. Moving down to the wheels, you'll find these 20-inch blacked out slipstream wheels. Now, earlier Model X's, including earlier Model X Ravens, had these wheels finished in silver, but the 2021 and onward models got blacked out versions of the slipstream wheel. So this is the 20-inch wheel. You could also get a 22-inch wheel. I would actually recommend getting the slipstreams because you get better range and more comfort. Speaking of comfort, you also have the active air suspension, which can raise from 6.1 inches on its very low setting to 8.9 inches on its very high setting. So it has quite a bit of adjustability. It also has active damping. That's something that was added with the Raven refresh back in 2019. So you can do comfort, auto, which will switch between comfort and sport, and then sport, obviously. And you also have a thing called advanced where you can tweak the settings to your liking. So overall, I like the air suspension. It makes it easy to get in and out, but also gives you enough ground clearance for clearing driveways and stuff like that. If you look on the fender, you'll actually notice that these side repeater cameras are actually gloss black instead of the usual chrome. Now, no other Raven Model X that I've seen has actually had this, so either this has been wrapped black or these have been replaced with a camera from a later Model X, which are gloss black from the factory. There also is a turn signal integrated into this camera to comply with regulation. Now, walking up to the Model X Raven, you'll notice a problem. The Raven does not have phone as a key. Now, newer Model X's do have this, so you can just walk up with the phone in your pocket and it'll automatically unlock, but these cars don't. You have to carry the key fob. The key fob does look like a little Tesla car. I'll pop a picture of it up here. You can open the Falcon Wing doors, the front doors, the trunk, and the charge port all from the key fob. It's nice to carry around for that reason. Since I'm a renter, I don't have the key fob with me, so I have to go into here, click the lock button if it's not already unlocked, and then go into controls and click start, and that'll remote start it so you can drive the car without the key fob. Since I don't have it on me, the door won't automatically open like it would if you had a key fob. So I have to push this and the door will automatically open up. And then once I get in, I put my foot on the brake and the door closes. And then if I had the key fob on me, it would automatically start up. You could put it into gear and drive away, but since I don't, I have to do it through the app. Let's open this up all the way. And let's talk interior. First thing you'll notice, the windshield is huge. It goes all the way from the base to all the way above your head. It's a lot of glass, and it is actually pretty well tinted from the rear view mirror portion upward. The only thing I'd be worried about is getting a crack in this windshield. It probably costs a lot of money to replace. I think about $2,000. The other thing with the windshield is the sun visors are a little strange. They are on the side of this pillar here, and you have to move them across and attach them to the center. And then if you need more sun blockage, you flip this little flap down. And then if you want a mirror, you gotta flip another flap down. So sun visors are weird, but they're not as bad as the ones in the Lucid. The Lucid Air has the same windshield, but they just suction cupped the sun visor straight to the window, so it ruined the whole point. So I actually really like the window. I think it's really cool. The second thing you'll notice is the center touchscreen. While it is 17 inches, which is pretty big, I might say, it's the wrong orientation. It's a portrait screen. The newer Model S, X, and every other Tesla are landscape, which is how it should be. But then again, I haven't really been bothered by the portrait display. The only things that do bother me are if you're using theater mode, it's the wrong orientation for YouTube. And the second thing is that if you want to access the climate controls, you have to look further away from the road to access them. But you don't actually need to take your hands off the wheel to do climate settings in this car, because one, the air vents are not digital. You don't have to go through the screen, although to be fair, you still do have to take your hands off the wheel, but they are still easier to access. Same thing for the temperature controls. I have the ability to just scroll up and down with the right scroll wheel to adjust the fan speed, and if I click this button and go to the temperature menu, I can also adjust the temperature with that scroll wheel as well. So as a driver, there's no need to take your hands off the steering wheel to adjust your temperature and fan speed. That is pretty brilliant. Second thing you'll notice with controls is that they're very traditional on the older X. So you have wipers just on the end of the turn signal stalk. You have a cruise control stalk, just like in a Mercedes, because these aren't Mercedes switchgear after all, and a little nub to adjust the steering column. So you just move it up, forward, and back, and like this to adjust your steering wheel rather than going through the screen like on a newer X or a Model 3. Same thing with the mirror controls. They're just right on the door where they should be, and the window lock as well. So the controls are a lot more traditional, which makes it easier to just hop in and go without telling people how to figure things out. Speaking of hopping in, you'll hop into these nice 12-way power adjustable heated seats. They're not ventilated, but they are still very comfortable. The newer Model X does get ventilation. The steering wheel is heated. The steering wheel is power adjustable, obviously, and this does have driver profiles. So if you have a specific key fob linked to this car, then it will automatically select the correct profile when you hop inside. Anyway, everything up in the front is pretty good. I generally like the interior with the exception of the center console. The center console has very limited storage. The cup holder situation is a little weird because you have to get rid of your armrest, and the armrest lid doesn't open, and the center console is a little flimsy. I don't know, that's my biggest complaint. They have fixed that in the newer Model X, thankfully, but this older one doesn't have that. Anyway, that's enough talking about the front seats. Let's move in the back because that's where the fun is. Close the door and walk away. All right, when you move around back, you'll find the thing that the Model X is known for. It's falcon wing doors. There's three things you need to know about them. First thing is that there's many different ways you can open them. You can open it from the key fob, the center display, the button on the outside, the button on the inside from the rear seat. The mobile app, you have a Palladium. The Raven, you can't open them from the mobile app, but on the newer cars, you can. The second thing you need to know is that there is sensors in this door. So there's one behind the sheet metal, so it won't open up to a wall, and there's one on the roof, so it won't hit a ceiling. And the third thing you need to know is that they will open differently depending on what is in front of them. So if I stand here, AKA being a car in the way, if I stand here, you'll notice the door will open differently depending on what is in front of it. So you can see that it didn't open all the way, but I can still sneak in through this gap right here and still get into the car. So even if there was a car parked here, you can still get in, unlike most car doors, which can't even open. See, if I open the front one, that's as far as you can open, and there's no way you're getting in through that door. I can also force it to continue opening if I hold the button down, so I can hold it down and it continues opening up. And this is pretty cool. But before we move on, I need to tell you guys about one pain point with the falcon wing doors. So I'm gonna move around to the other side. And the issue I'm talking about involves the second thing that I told you guys about them, which is the sensor. Problem is that sometimes the sun can be so strong that the heat generated from this panel tricks the door into thinking that there's something so close to it, it won't even open. So in this case, See? It senses things. So it thinks there's something in the way and it won't continue opening, even though there's nothing in its way. So I keep going and it continues opening. And then if I close it again, then it closes just fine. Now, that is an issue with every Model X, not a specific issue with the Raven or this specific car. Every Model X will have this issue if you live somewhere where it's super, super hot. On the inside of the car, in the center screen, it actually shows you that it's sensing something that's in its way, whether it be above it or beside it. So if I try to open the door, it won't even open because that door has so much heat on that panel, it won't even open the door. So I have to actually hold it and manually override, and then it'll open. Very slowly, I might add. So that's a bit of a problem if you live somewhere where it gets really hot, especially Texas. It's 104 degrees outside, so ignore me sweating so much in this review, but there you go, now the door is open. The second thing that is a little concerning is, well, there is a sensor right here, so if I try to close the door, it won't close. If I stand here and then try to close the door, it will start closing. And you obviously saw I was still under the door, so that's a bit sketchy as well. There's a third problem, and I have to move back around to the other side to show you guys that. The third issue has to do with the alignment of the Falcon Wing doors relative to the rest of the car. Now, when you open the door, you'll notice that it will shift backwards slightly. That has to do with the whole structure being a little bit loose. You can see I can move the whole door, and it shakes relative to the car, because the car isn't shaking, but the door is. You also notice that right here, the paint is starting to shave off because of the alignment of this trim piece up here rubbing on this. So I've seen a lot of issues with the X Falcon Wing doors, especially on a hill, being shifted so far back that they actually won't close fully. They get stuck halfway. Luckily, this one is not quite that bad, but it's still not ideal. Why did it stop? There's nothing in the way. Hello? Just close. See, these Falcon Wing doors have some weird issues. So for those who are curious, yes, you can drive with the Model X Falcon Wing doors open. So if I power up the car real quick, start, then open the doors, and then shift into gear, there'll be a little message that says Falcon Wing door open, so it says please close, but you can click ignore, and then you can shift into gear and actually drive. Now you can drive for as long as you want, but you can't cross 10 miles an hour. If you do, the doors automatically start to close, as you can see right there. So yes, you can drive with the doors up. Should you? Probably not, but it is pretty cool, and it is a nice party trick to show people, because I've seen a lot of videos of people getting their Falcon Wing doors ripped off of the car, and that's just because they're stupid and ignored the warning message. So yeah, let's do a little launch with the doors open, why not? Ignore and continue drive. Oh, it won't let me open it when it's in... Okay, there we go. Open. And then drive, ignore, drive, and go. Boom, 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 boom. Anyway, that's enough talking about the doors and how they work and like what the problems are with it. Let's just actually open it up and get inside. So you can see it opens up pretty quickly. I can hop in. This is, again, the 6-seater configuration. So sitting behind myself, although this seat is actually a bit further back because it's in easy entry mode than it would be if I was driving, I still have plenty of leg room. So I can put my feet under the chair in front of me, and I still have just enough leg room to squeeze them behind the chair. But that's a benefit of the chair being slightly offset to the left, because if I look completely straight, I'm staring at this part of the headrest and not the center, which is a little odd. You also have vents on the B pillar and air vents on the back of the center console, although weirdly, the vents on the B pillar are controlled via the rear climate setting. However, the rear vents on the console are on all the time, which is odd. If you look towards the back of this console, you'll notice along with those air vents is 2 USB-A ports and 2 cup holders that extend like this. However, you are missing that rear touchscreen that comes on the newer Model X's, which is a big benefit because the touchscreen allows you to adjust the rear climate control, temperature, and fan speed, move the electronic air vents in the rear because the new car has that, turn on your heated seats. Currently in this car, even though it has rear heated seats, you have to ask the person in the front to turn them on for you. These middle row seats on the 6-seater are power adjustable, so I can move it forward if you need someone taller to sit in the back row, or I can move it back. I can also recline it with the same control, so I can recline it forward a little bit or backward electrically, which is pretty convenient. One complaint I have with the second row seats though is that they're not super wide and they don't have an armrest on the inboard side. So for long trips, it might be a bit uncomfortable to not have an armrest. Obviously you do have an armrest when you close this door, of course, but just sitting here, you don't really have a place to rest your arm. Also, to buckle the seatbelt buckle is in kind of an odd spot. It's not on the outside of the seat, it's built into the seat itself, so it's a little bit hard to find. Same thing with the child anchor point. The child anchor point is actually all the way on this bottom of the seat, way down here. So it's a little bit inconvenient to access. Thankfully, there are some upsides compared to an earlier Model X because they got rid of the gloss black seat backs on the newer Model X's, including the pre-refresh, such as this one. The early ones had gloss black seat backs, say that 5 times fast, and they scratched really bad, so I'm glad they got rid of those. Yeah, overall the room back here is perfectly great. I have enough knee room, enough headroom because of this glass piece up here, so I'm not too constricted. And yeah, overall, the second row is pretty usable. However, the third row is not super big, so I guess let's climb back there if I have to. Now it's time for me to get into the third row. This is not gonna be great because it doesn't look especially large, but since this is the 6-seater, you could technically just walk in between the 2 seats to get in the back, but I'm actually gonna do it the proper way and push this little button to move the seat forward, which it moves forward electrically and it actually moves fairly quick, so it's not too much waiting, and then you can slide in. Thankfully, this little thing for the wheel well actually makes it fairly easy to slip into the third row compared to some other cars. Pardon the air noise back here, but I have no way to adjust the fan speed because there is no rear screen, there's no screen back here, there's no knob to adjust the air temperature / fan speed. The only way you can do that is from the touchscreen at the front. So if I put this seat back, you'll notice that I have barely enough legroom for me being 6'1". If you're any taller than this, you won't fit back here because my hat is just barely touching the rear window glass, my knee is up against the seat and the wheel well, and my other knee is in the aisle. So if you had a 7-seater Model X, I wouldn't fit back here at all. But if you plan on taking people in the third row quite often, the 6 seat is the right choice for you. If you don't, or you need these second row seats to fold flat, get the 7-seater since the 6-seater seats don't fold flat at all. They actually don't even fold, period. They're a single piece chair that just moves forward and backward. Another things to note back here in the third row, you obviously do have air vents, which is a must. You do have 2 cup holders. They're in a very annoying spot. They're right where your butt goes in the center of the seat. That's kind of weird. There also is a USB port at the front of this cup holder thing, and that's about it. So third row, yes, it's functional, and if you have little kids, it's probably fine. It is more spacious than I was expecting, but then again, it's not like a Chevy Tahoe where you have infinite legroom in the back. Anyway, let's get out of here. Although getting out is actually super easy because of the Falcon Wing doors and this little wheel well arch right there. All right, let's move to the driver quarter panel. This is where the charge port is. So you just tap right here and the charge port opens up, although it was kind of squeaky feeling. So this is where I usually discuss powertrain specs, and this is kind of where the Raven Model X disappoints me a little bit. So this has a 98 kilowatt hour battery made out of 18650 lithium cells made by Panasonic, has a peak charging rate of 200 kilowatts DC and a peak AC charging rate of 48 amps at 240 volts, so that's 11.2 kilowatts. And the range out of this battery is supposedly 371 miles, according to the EPA. However, I've been getting closer to about 250 on the highway, which by my standards is still actually pretty respectable. So the range is not the issue, but the charging speed is. This thing takes about 40 minutes to get from 10 to 80%, and compared to a more modern Tesla, that's pretty slow because newer ones do it in about 28 minutes or less. So DC fast charging rate, not super great. The other issue I have with the powertrain is the drive units. Now, there's nothing wrong with the drive units themselves because this Model X is all-wheel drive, so it will be perfectly capable on some dirt roads. It has 531 horsepower, which means this thing is no slouch. 0 to 60 happens in 4.4 seconds, right thereabouts. And you really don't need it to be any faster. That's not why it makes me a little annoyed. What does make me annoyed is the fact that the front drive unit is the permanent magnet one and the rear motor is the induction unit. That is backwards compared to most Teslas. Usually Teslas have the permanent magnet motor as the rear motor because permanent magnet motors tend to actually be the primary drive axle. The problem with that is that there's a lot of torque steer on throttle because of the increased power at the front compared to the rear. And secondly, because of that increased power, the half shafts vibrate pretty significantly when you floor it. Although this tends to happen less and less the lower the suspension is set on the vehicle. throttle. So if you're in very low, you probably won't feel it. If you're in high, you're gonna feel it. But overall, it's plenty quick. It'll probably be fine off-road, as far as you can get off-road with the limited ground clearance, but the torque steer is a little bit disconcerting and the half shaft wobble in the front is not ideal. I also forgot to mention that that front motor is the permanent magnet motor out of the rear of a Model 3, which is actually kind of interesting. I also thought I'd mention that this car doesn't have a heat pump. It only has a resistive heater. Basically, all that means is that it's just going to be less efficient in the wintertime compared to a newer model. It also means that the HVAC is just also generally less efficient when it comes to battery cooling and other things like that. And this car doesn't have a lithium low voltage battery. It has a lead acid battery like every other car. You know, it works. It's just not as up to date as a newer Model X. Now, before we move on, let's talk about the taillights. So these are the taillights on the 2021 and 2022 Model X's. The 2023 actually has a different charge port door, kind of like the Model 3 where it flips vertically instead of sideways like this. Down here you have your turn signal and brake light, although when it is on the turn signal, it is amber, which I do appreciate. Your reverse light's over here, and this is your tail light. For some reason, I don't think this is used. On the Model 3, that's your brake light, but on this car, it's down here. That's weird. You also have your third brake light on this fixed spoiler. The early Model X's, like 2016, did have an active spoiler. So it would raise and lower depending on your speed, but this one's just fixed in place, and I don't mind that. I think it looks actually pretty sporty with this little lip. All this is chrome. You have your dual motor badge down there. That's how you can tell that it is a Raven and not a original Model X. And you also have your parking sensors. Down there you have, under the bumper, the cover for your tow hitch, because this thing can tow 5,000 pounds, which for a vehicle of its size class, I think is actually fairly impressive. Although considering the vehicle's weight, maybe it isn't, because this thing weighs 5,400 pounds. Let's pop the trunk. You'll notice that apart from the noise, because it is a little bit clattery, that might have to do with a bit of aging, that there is not a ton of space behind the third row. Now, there is a decent amount of underfloor storage. In fact, quite a considerable amount. You could probably fit 2 carry-on luggage cases down there. But overall, there's not a ton of space. Now, obviously, I can fold the third row and get a lot more space. But then again, since this being a 6-seat model, the second row seats won't fold flat on the 6-seater models. In fact, they don't actually fold at all. So for me, since I wouldn't be using the third row a ton, I think I'd actually go for the 7-seater, because the 7-seater second row does actually fold completely flat. You also have a couple tie downs on the side, a 12-volt power outlet, and that's basically it. And you have the rear air vents for the third row. One thing I will note about the power tailgate is the sensor that controls the height for the Falcon Wing doors also controls the height for this. So if you're in a low parking garage, it won't hit the roof due to that sensor. So that is a nice feature. Anyway, let's close this up.
Quirks and features.
It gets pretty loud. It goes up to 11, which is funny. Opinion on the sound system. It sounds good, like conventionally good for car audio, although I think it being a hatchback makes the subwoofer not as powerful as my Model 3. My Model 3 will physically shake the rear view mirror, so not as good as the Model 3 sound system. It still is very, very acceptable by my standards. So don't be afraid to get this car because the sound system is bad. It actually is pretty good, and the ability to add custom presets to the sound system is nice. You can do this on newer Teslas as well, because this is a software thing, but it is nice to have the ability to mess with this. Although the balance was not directly in the center, so let's try it now. Okay, now it's a little bit better. You do have the toy box option, and this being a 2021 model does have the boombox feature, which allows you to play sounds via the car's pedestrian warning speaker. So you can either change the lock sound of your car, you can replace your horn with a different sound, or you can use the megaphone feature to talk to people outside the car. You can see it's playing sound right there. So that's a pretty cool party trick. You do have Sentry mode and the dash cam feature. This is a must-have, and I feel like every single car on the road should have this feature, but almost none do. Only Tesla and Rivian have this to my knowledge. So it uses the 4 cameras around the car to record a nearly 360-degree view at all times when you're either away from the car or driving. So this is a must-have feature. Makes it to where you don't have to install a second dash cam. It's nice and convenient in that regard. One thing regarding the climate control though is that the Model X does have bioweapon defense mode, which just has a massive HEPA filter in the front that'll filter out smoke and other debris that may be in the air that could harm your lungs. So that is a nice feature to have, especially during the California wildfire thing. That would have been a super nice thing to have in your car. You also have the Model Xmas light show, which everyone knows about at this point, but it's pretty cool. I haven't been able to show that to you because I need the key fob and I don't have it, so yeah, you have to press the lock button on the key fob for that to work. You also have the fart mode like this, and you can also do it outside the car via the speaker on the outside. Interestingly though, you can't do it in the 3rd row seats, which is odd. Feels like something that Tesla would go to the lengths to put in for no apparent reason. And there's also just a bunch of other little gimmick things like a sketch pad, Mars mode, which actually is kind of nice if you're filming a YouTube video because it blocks out your location, Santa mode, Rainbow Road, all the cool little things. The Tracks app, which you can make music with, which is honestly pretty cool. Speaking of theater mode, it's right here. You can watch Netflix, Hulu, YouTube, TikTok, Twitch, whatever you want. Click right here and it'll load up. But then again, the screen is the wrong orientation. So does it really matter? Kinda. It still is bigger than your phone would be, even though it's cut in half, but you know, it's not the best. You also notice that it doesn't load especially quick because the older cars use an older CPU architecture than the newer ones. It's a nice feature. Oh, look at that resolution. That's really bad. Anyway, and just like all Teslas, you do actually have a web browser, which, why? But, you know, if you wanted to search some things like, I don't know, carrots, Carrie Underwood, I don't know, just clicking things. Boom, there you go. It's a web browser. Not much to it. Although I appreciate, unlike the Model 3 and Model Y and basically every new Tesla, there is a glove box button. Although the owner has a pin set on it, so it won't actually open, but that is the button that you press for the glove box to open. A bit of an interesting thing I noticed is the door will actually close harder the closer it is to the end of its travel. So you can see here, it goes a little slow and just carries momentum, but if I open the door to here, then press the brake, it slams it a little bit harder to get it to actually latch. And if it's just barely open, you know, it closes it with a bit more force. Even though the wipers are full size, it's kind of odd how they just don't cover the whole window. So it's just a weird perspective. Although the washers do come out of the actual wipers themselves, which is nice. You also notice that they stay kind of in an up position until they're fully done and they park in a lower position. Anyway, I think that's enough of the quirks and features of this vehicle. Let's take it out on the road because it actually drives considerably well considering how much this thing weighs and how big it is. Keep in mind that this thing is 5,400 pounds. Yeah, it's not light. Anyway, let's go. So obviously all the doors are open, so I just hop in and click the close all button. So both side doors will close by themselves, the Falcon Wing doors will close, and the trunk will close. Push my foot on the brake, the car will start. Gotta click my profile. AC will start up, and into drive, boom, that's it. So it's not hard to start this thing up once you have the key in your pocket, which I don't have, but if you don't have the key in your pocket, but you do have access to the Tesla mobile app, you just go into the control section on the mobile app and click start, and it'll start the car without the key fob. You can hear the AC compressor spooling up. All right, let's floor it, 30, 40, 50, I mean that's on an uphill, but still, it's about as fast as my Model 3 for those who have watched this video. This does 0 to 60 in about 4.5 seconds. I do have the Draggy device with me that's connected to this power bank. Let's drop the suspension for this corner, so let's go very low. It automatically put itself in low. We're gonna put it in sport mode. Steering feel on heavy. Let's gas it. 70, 80, into the corner at 90. Bend. So yeah, it's no sports car, but for a massive 3-row vehicle, it's pretty competent at handling high-speed corners, I will say. Now, I went over that train track, Little bit bumpy on the very low suspension setting, but it's not too bad. Let's put it into comfort mode and raise it back up to medium. Or actually, no, we're gonna get on the highway, so we'll leave it in very low for efficiency. Because there's really no need to raise the suspension on the highway. So let's floor it here, a little bit of torque steer. There's the speed limit, about 75. So that was pretty quick. It feels about as fast as my Model 3 ever did, with the exception of the torque steer. The front motor is the permanent magnet motor, and the rear motor is the induction one, which is the opposite of most Teslas. The problem with that is you get a lot of torque steer on the throttle. Gauge autopilot, pull back 2 times on the cruise control stalk, not on the shifter stalk like the Model 3. Let's do a little on-ramp here, on-ramp action. I mean, for something as big as it is, it handles pretty well, I will say. Whoa, okay. Right here. Fuel trucks have to stop at this ramp. I don't know why they put train tracks here, because I never have seen a single train go through those. I noticed the regen in this car, while decent, is not as strong as I would like it. I would like it to be a little bit more aggressive than it is. Alright, we're gonna do some draggy GPS runs here. Hopefully that doesn't slide around too much. I mean, it currently is. I don't have an actual way to attach it. I'm gonna come to a stop, reset the thing, and go. Come on, and 60. 0 to 65.03, and that was uphill. I could see the traction control light flashing. Can't talk again. Honestly, I think because of the windshield, I might just be able to have the draggy in the seats, and it'll be fine. Stop. 3, 2, 1. Floor it. 30. 60. So what do I think of the Tesla Model X? Well, as a car, I really actually enjoyed this thing. The doors are a really cool party trick because people think that they're super cumbersome, and sometimes they are, but they're actually more functional than I think a lot of people give them credit for. They can open in incredibly tight spaces, they're intelligent enough to not hit things, and they look cool. So that's just kind of a neat party trick of this vehicle, although I worry about the longevity of them. Now, for the other things, it's still a Tesla. It has all the Tesla features you'd want, such as autopilot, dog mode, Sentry mode, all the little gimmicky Easter eggs in the screen that you like to play around with because Elon is an absolute child and added a fart whoopee cushion for no reason. And the air suspension's cool, so you can clear driveways. The cargo space is actually pretty good with the 3rd row down, and it's super comfortable. Now the question is it actually worth saving 15 to 20 grand by getting a Raven over a Palladium? And I think the answer is, it depends. Because 1, no keyless entry, which is a little bit, well, hold on, I should rephrase that. It has keyless entry, but it doesn't have phone as a key. And for me, as a Model 3 owner, I'm extremely used to having phone as a key, so I don't know if I could get used to carrying a key fob again, but I think once you own this for a period of time, you'll get used to it, and the key fob will actually be a nice benefit because then you can open the door without being directly next to the car or having to use your phone. So maybe it's worth having, but I kind of wish it just had that as an option. But then again, that isn't the biggest deal breaker for me. The biggest deal breaker is the charging speed. 200 kilowatts, theoretical peak DC charge rate, which I've never actually seen on any Raven. The highest I've seen online and in my own testing has been around 185, maybe 190 if you're lucky. And while the peak isn't the problem, the curve is. It only holds that for about 5 minutes and then it dies down to about 100. So not a very great charging car. Now, the range being pretty good around local areas means that you shouldn't have to charge it as often. So if you never do road trips or only do one maybe once, maybe twice a year, you can get away with it. But if you do them extremely often, get a Palladium, skip the Raven, spend the extra money because it's going to be a little bit of a pain in the butt to charge this thing over and over and over again. That said, it still is doable and the supercharger network is still fantastic. The question is though, would I buy a Model X? The answer is yes, just not the Raven. For me, I need that faster charging, so I would get a blue Palladium with the 7-seat white interior. That'd be my dream spec. But overall, I love the Model X as a concept, just needs some finer tuning and improvements, which the Palladium model brings. Anyway, that's gonna be the end of this video. See y'all in the next one.